So we'll start off. What's your favourite memory of Barry?
I think my enduring memory of Barry is how generous he was, both with his time and his knowledge of comedy and his jokes. Whenever we asked him to do anything at the BFI, he was always up for doing it. Whenever I saw him, whenever I went to see him doing a gig or just met him for drinks, he was just so open about what he would talk about and how he would be friendly with you. He was a very, very friendly guy.
Okay. In what ways did the windmill offer him a grounding which he would build upon throughout his career?
I think the windmill was important for a lot of comedians of that generation, certainly those a little older than Barry that had come out of the war and were looking to try and see if the talents they'd developed at Ensa or whilst they were in the forces, tried to see if they could cut it as a professional. And the windmill gave them, a lot of comedians, that sort of start in life. You know, it was a brutal, by all accounts, quite a brutal thing, because the people weren't really there to listen to the comedians. You know, they were secondary to the requirements of the clientele. But I think it probably made you grow a tough skin. It got you to meet other comedians and to give you a taste of what the circuit was like. Probably in the deepest end possible. It's jumping in at the deep end. Always a good thing.
Yeah. Have you got a favourite joke of Barry's?
Well, yes. I asked him once whether he ever suffered from writer's block, and he thought a minute and then said to me, he said, I once tried to think of a single word for 2 weeks. He says, and then it came to me. It was fortnight. So I think that was, I hadn't heard that before when he said it, and he dragged me in with his delivery, because he was always a superb deliverer of jokes. He knew exactly. He used to. There's a famous parrot joke he used to tell, and he was very adamant about you had to use a hard surname, a hard name in this. So the joke ends with him saying, the joke's about the woman that buys a parrot and it's very cheap, and the owner of the pet shop, she says, why is it so cheap? And the owner of the pet shop says, well, he's got a bit of previous, he knows a bit of colourful language. So she said, I don't mind, it's so beautiful, I don't care. And he says, well, I'll give you the lineup. He says he used to be the bird, a parrot in a brothel. And she says, oh, so, you know, she said, I don't care, for that price, I don't care. But she takes him home and she whips the cloth off the cage, and the parrot looks around and says, oh, new house, very nice, very nice. And she calls down her daughters and she says, girls, come and see what mother's bought. And they come down, and the parrot looks at the 2 teenage girls and goes, new girls, very nice, very nice. And then she calls her husband down. She says, darling, come and see what I've got. And the husband walks in, and the parrot goes, oh, hello, Keith. And I remember a conversation with him about how important it was that the guy's name had to be a hard name, like Keith or Gary. It had to have a hard syllable that started like that. And he'd heard someone say it, and they'd said, oh, hello, Simon. And he thought, that just doesn't work. That's a terrible, terrible destruction of the joke. So he was very precise. He really understood comedy and the construction of comedy.
What is his legacy on British comedy?
I think because he lasted so long, and because he, if you like, he was popular in many fields. He's one of those few people that was at home in vaudeville or in the more surreal world of Monty Python. So he worked with the Pythons, but he also worked with Danny LaRue, you know, and at the Windmill. So he worked in that old world as well. He was like a link between the two. Like Bob Monkhouse, I think he never, he didn't just think that the old ways were best. He actually kept up to date with what was happening in comedy. He liked and encouraged new comedians. He was very much keeping up with the system, and he wasn't one of these people that turned his back when they started to get ruder or just go on a different path to him. He was happy with both ways. If you look at when he works with Kenny Everett, I think that's very interesting, because in many ways, with Barry Cryer writing for him, what you get is Everett crosses both those worlds. He's got one foot in vaudeville, he's got one foot in sort of almost drag acts, but the other foot in that surreal world of Monty Python, where anything goes and the sketches are wacky and zany. So he's got and that was, I think, a lot of that was Barry's influence. But of course, it's why he got on with Kenny Everett. I think they were like-minded in their comedy. But I think Barry's lasting legacy was his ability to be up to date with comedy and to keep appreciating comedy throughout his career. So he never really went out of fashion, and he was worshipped by the old school, but loved by the new school as well.
And finally, how will you remember Barry?
I'll remember him for just one of those people who lights up the room when he walks in, you know, and how much fun it was when I knew I was going to go and see him and we were going out for a drink. And as I say, because the reason I encountered him really was because of the work we did at the BFI and the work I was into as a comedy and a TV historian, if you like, and how much he gave to that. But how much that gave us a good grounding on stuff to talk about. And we became friends because of that. But it was easy to become friends with Barry. As you can see by after he died, the outpouring of love for him and the stories that people had and the appreciation they had. It's because he made friends easily, he kept friends, and he was a loyal friend. He was a good bloke.